I have all this beautiful, wonderful meat. Could that deer have had CWD? It's in a CWD area. Well, it'd be great if I had a way to test that.
All right, well, now that Brandon is officially not bugged, we're going to go ahead and get this episode 38 of The Watering Hole started. We've got a special guest in the house today.
Who's counting?
Well,
Ben?
right here, it says 38, so I just figured I might as well go ahead and let it rip.
Do we think that's accurate? Do we trust these guys?
Ben, we can trust Ben when it comes to those kind of things. So we've got a special guest today.
Let's go, Tom.
Before I dive into Gary here and I introduce Gary, everything started with your brother, Bruce, first of all. Okay, yeah. So I met Bruce, believe it or not, many years ago, and it was Big Buck Bruce.
Yes,
he's even in my cell phone as Big Buck Bruce.
He was Big Bass Bruce at one time, and then I got him into hunting. And
Big Bass went to Big Buck
Then he became
Bruce.
Big Buck Bruce. Yes.
Okay, so Gary Pusateri, did I get it right?
Close enough.
All right, thank you.
Yeah, we just went over this, but whatever.
And I'm still might
Todd's
be off.
not really good at this pronunciation
We can
thing.
play at the end of this how terrible I am with last names and
That's
basically pronouncing all kinds of stuff. Thank God I have other skills. Justin's going to add. He doesn't know what those are, but I have a few other skills over Justin. But Gary, I spoke at Bruce during the hunting season, I want to say last year.
Okay.
And we were talking about you and your hunting and his hunting. And obviously every time I talk to him, it seems like CWD is something that always kind of inches slowly into our conversations. He used to hunt with you quite a bit up in Buffalo, Wisconsin. I know that's where you spend a lot of your time. And do you still own your land in Wisconsin?
I do.
Up there? Okay. And he was like, oh my gosh. He calls me up one day and he's like, I have got to hook you up with my brother. He is onto some really cool things that I know you're going to be interested in. And that is talking about CWD and potentially some things that are coming down the pipe that could really help, in my opinion, change the direction in the future of some of the things that are happening. So
I hope so, yeah.
I hope so too, because there's a lot of different things that are happening. I think there's plenty of people who are going to argue whether EHD, CWD, who knows what's going to wipe all these deer out eventually. I know it's not going to be Justin, that's for sure. He is not capable of doing that. Maybe your brother and you are, and me combined, but not Ben and Justin.
I'll just leave now. You guys have fun.
So, Gary, let's go ahead and kind of back this up a little bit, talk about some of your background and how in the heck we are sitting in our studio here after all these years of you being a doctor, and now here we are talking about CWD and some of these amazing things that you've got coming forward.
Yeah, it's actually kind of an interesting story. So I'm going to take it back a little ways and tell you about when I first started bow hunting, which was a very, very long time ago. Actually, I was 13 years ago. So that's years ago. And
we're not doing the math. Don't worry.
Had two uncles that started bow hunting in the early 60s. So when I turned, I think it was 13 years old. So 1967 was my first year that I got to start bow hunting and absolutely kind of fell in love with it. Had to give it up when I went to medical school for almost 15 years. That was a very difficult thing to do, but I guess if you know what you want, you're willing to pay prices for those things. Started my brother Bruce and I, when I was finishing up a residency, we were up in Mercer, Wisconsin, and met a guy up there named Bill Tutt, who was just a phenomenal outdoorsman, was actually Fred Bear's trick shot artist back in the day, and it was in sales and traveled all over with Fred Bear and was part of the ISHI. He was I think an ISHI award winner at one point in time, if you guys are familiar with that. He kind of got my brother Bruce and I back into bow hunting, and off we went. And we really, went from hunting with a recurve to the very first compound bows. You could hear them from about 3 blocks away as you would draw, but it kind of changed, the way that hunting went. Fast forward, started hunting in Buffalo County with Tom Inderbo. You guys may be familiar with Tom.
Sure.
Tom is kind of the gold standard.
Buffalo County legend.
The ledge, man, and he is one of my very best buds. And, I learned more from Tom about, bow hunting, sitting and talking to Tom for hours at a time than
More than Bruce?
Even more than Bruce. Even more. hunted with him for several years. Bruce and I hunted with him for several years. Bruce actually found him initially, hunted with him for several years, and then the dream was to own property there. And lo and behold, I was blessed enough to be in a position to eventually buy some land. Tom and I drove around, and boy, I found a wonderful piece there that I've owned now for almost 20 years and have enjoyed the heck out of it. Hunting is important to me on many levels. Not to mention the challenge of hunting in general, but I love whitetails. I love whitetail hunting, and the camaraderie that's developed in a hunting camp that I think a lot of people miss out on if they have never had a chance to go hunting. People think hunting is about killing something, and if hunting was about killing something, I would have given up a long time ago. I'll be honest with both of you, because there's so much more to it than just putting an animal on the ground, and it's just been a passion of mine. It's something that I got my son into at a very young age. One of my daughters is a hunter. My son-in-laws now, I've gotten them into hunting. Have brought a lot of friends of mine that otherwise wouldn't have had a chance to shoot trophy bucks, cousins, etc., over to my property and given them an opportunity to shoot the biggest deer of their life. So it's been really a blessing. About 2 years ago now, so actually in January, so 2.5 years ago, Tom Inderbo, of all people, calls me up one day and he goes, "Oh my God, Doc, I'm going to tell you there's CWD in the county. They found 2 deer, and the DNR is going to have a big show here. They're going to have a town hall meeting. Can you come?" And I'm like, when is it? He's like, "Tonight." I'm like, "No, I'll never make it there tonight. I can't."
Why does it always happen like that?
So Tom said, "I think it's going to be, not a podcast, but what do they call it? Virtual, that you can access it virtually." No sooner did I hang up with him, my next door neighbor, Ted Marm, who owned an outfitting service right next to my property, called me up. "Doc, holy cow, they found 2 deer really close to here. CWD, the DNR's talking about doing some crazy stuff. They're having this same story." Honest to goodness, guys, it was amazing. Within probably the first 3 hours that I was awake, I got another 4 phone calls from friends of mine that own property or hunt over there that had heard about it. And I don't know where, this was on display, but they had heard about it at the same time. So I couldn't make it, but I sat online and listened to the meeting. And, bow hunting in Buffalo County deer hunting in general is extremely important over there. It's beyond the resource. It's beyond the family tradition there. It is important, from a financial standpoint for those folks over there. It's a big deal.
Let me interrupt just for one second here, Gary. Now, you said 2.5 years ago, but you've heard about CWD before this phone call happened 2.5 years ago.
Absolutely.
Entering into Wisconsin. So it just started traveling closer up to you, just to kind of
finally hit home.
It finally hit home, right?
Ago.
And it's kind of selfish as that sounds. All of a sudden, the mother of invention is, right?
Yep.
So I sat and listened, and one of their solutions was, unfortunately they didn't follow through on this, but one of their solutions was, we need to find out what percentage of deer in Buffalo County have CWD now. And their solution was going to be unlimited tags, weapon of choice, September 1st through February, the end of February. And everybody was kind of losing it. You're going to destroy the resource. You're going to ruin property values. People are going to quit coming to hunt here. And people were up in arms. And by God, the next day I started getting more phone calls, and it's interesting. I think it wasn't, "Doc, can you help us figure this out?" It was more of a, informational page. "Hey, Doc, holy cow, what are we going to do? We got to try to get a group together." So I went to bed that night angry. I was like, "Oh my goodness, I waited a long time to have this happen. This is so important to me." And lo and behold, if they follow through on this, it's really going to put an impact on the herd. And truly, I mean, if you wipe out a major chunk of the herd like they did in Iowa County, it changes the genetics, literally. So I went to bed that night, and about 2:00 in the morning, I woke up and sat up in bed and went, "Oh my goodness." My wife's like, You having the big one? No, I said, no. Honest to goodness.
What big one are we talking about here?
Well, not that big.
Fair enough.
Ding, ding, ding. Okay.
Just saying.
So
You never know.
I said, holy cow, using the technology that we've been doing for years now for human disease, we could find a blood diagnostic for whitetails so you wouldn't have to kill the animal. You could make a diagnosis using blood without having to kill the animal. And she said, that's nice, honey, go back to bed. So I got very excited about that. Let me back up just for a minute and explain to you guys that for the 12 years prior to that.
Right, because I think that's kind of an important part of the story.
Yeah, it's a very important part of the story. Actually, again, my brother Bruce involved. One of his very best friends was working with what would eventually be he and his partner became my business partners, all business partners. They made a kind of a remarkable discovery doing something called gene expression. So it's important that I explain to you what this is so that you understand what it is that we're doing.
Now, hang on real quick here.
Sure.
I got to jump in here. So
Yes,
now,
you bet.
But during this whole time, you already owned a company.
Yeah, that's what he's talking about.
That's the one I'm talking
Okay,
about.
okay.
Yeah.
I just wanna
So
make
that's
sure
the one that we
we're
formed. So
going here.
Bruce calls me up and says, these guys made this incredible discovery. You got to see what they're doing. And so he told me, and I said, well, they're full of it. There's no way, if they could actually do that, we'd change the planet and we'd change the way medicine's practiced on Earth. So they decided that in the process of discovering what they discovered, that they wanted to start a business. And they said, who do we need? And they said, well, we need sales, but we need a physician from a clinical standpoint and somebody who's got a big mouth. And my brother said, well, that'd be my brother Gary. And my business partner Mike, who I knew for some time, said, yes, you're right. He'd be very good at this. So I came down, looked at what they had, and went, holy cow, you guys, this is truly remarkable. So enough with the tease. They had a third-party service lab, and they were doing something called gene expression diagnostics for different labs, for different university and hospital settings. In the process of doing those particular discoveries, you do 3 or 4 blood tests for breast cancer with this hospital. You do 3 or 4 tests for breast cancer with a couple of different university settings. You can never share that information with the other places. It's very it's all kept very hush hush between institutions. However, you can see the data, and they're like, holy cow! Look there's a pattern here. So every animal, every creature, living creature, has a genome. Okay, a genome is a set of genes that makes us who we are. So in the human genome, there's somewhere around 24,000 genes. So those 24,000 genes are what make us human. In that mix is what makes you, and me, and it's very specific and frighteningly specific enough that that's what they use in forensics, right? They look at the DNA. So everybody's DNA. So there's about 24,000 genes in the human genome. And those genes are basically a gigantic library of recipes. Okay, so every single cell in your body that has a nucleus has that genome packed into that nucleus. And it contains all that genetic information. And the recipe for so there's hundreds of thousands of recipes buried in that those 24,000 genes. Depending on what the body is asking for, certain genes the volume will be turned up, so the gene expression will be made higher. Certain genes will be turned down, so the volume of those will be lower, so the gene expression is lower. So if we look at those 24,000 genes, generally what happens is if we take diseased animals, or let's say breast cancer, because that's where this kind of originated in the human side anyway. And if you compare those 24,000 genes in 10 or 15 people that have breast cancer, that we have breast cancer, and then we take another 10 or 15 patients that we know don't have breast cancer, and we cross-reference them, somewhere between 50 and 200 genes of that 24,000 genes will fall out that are an absolute specific, let's call it a fingerprint for that disease. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me. I mean, this is incredible. So you think you can do that for another disease? And they're like, yeah, well, technically you should be able to do it for any disease. So we formed a company. We started doing this company, worked with a very large clinic from the Midwest, and we did a disease called fibromyalgia. And when they came up with that idea, we're like, why in the world of all the diseases would you want to pick fibromyalgia? They said, because if you can find fibromyalgia in blood, we believe that you could find any disease. And lo and behold, we came up with what's called a bioprofile, or that signature with those genes that are either up or down regulated compared to the control group. Does that make sense? Am I making myself clear here? Do you have questions about that before I go on? It's truly
pretty fascinating.
Miraculous. It's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating. So we ended up doing fibromyalgia, and then we decided to go forward. We got a group of investors, that believed in us before we had actually just done any real discovery, and we went on to do stomach cancer. So we have a bioprofile for stomach cancer. So in blood, we can tell you if you have metaplasia or gastritis, which was our control group. So that's how people present to a clinic when they, believe it or not, when they have stomach cancer. They present just like if you had reflux or gastritis, is generally the initial symptoms. And so you don't, as a physician, as the guy in the clinic, you don't say, oh, that guy's probably got stomach cancer. You go through the protocol because so few people actually have that, right? The problem is, as you go through the protocol, you're taking months and months to ultimately get to the point where you go, you know what, none of this is working. I need to get you in to see somebody else. And so now you've wasted 6 to 8 months. So with a blood test like this, where I can tell you if you have gastritis, pre-cancer, or actually have cancer, with a blood test, it's a pretty remarkable test. Very difficult to get that across the line when you have a disruptive, technology in medicine. You are going to step on somebody else's toes to bring your technology to market. So it's been a real challenge. We've gone so far as to do colorectal cancer, breast cancer, lung cancer. So we have some really remarkable stuff. So I was very confident that when I called my partners, they'd say, yeah, I think we can do this. So the question was, I'm calling at 4:30 in the morning, and it's the old line from Moondance. My partner Mike answers the phone. He says, "Who died?" And I said, "No, nobody died. Here's what's going on. Can we and will we?" And he's like, "Gosh, it should be a slam dunk. We have to make sure that the deer genome's been discovered, right? Because we need to be able to access those deer genes for the deer genome, but otherwise, heck, we should be able to do this." So that's where this all started. And so here we go. And it was really encouraging for me to think that, some crazy general practitioner from up in northern Wisconsin could, be involved in something that could change the planet, first of all, but then to do something that I have a passion for and to maybe impact that in an extremely positive way. So off we went. And there's, when you start a company, you are fired up, boy. This is going to be easy. This is going to be fast. This is going to be no problem. Okay, where are you getting your samples? Because you got to have positive deer with CWD. Well, you're not going to walk through the woods until you find somebody with a deer with chronic wasting disease, right? So we decided, actually I was with Tom Inderbo, and his son said, "Geez, Doc, who could really help with this and would really benefit from this a lot would be the deer farming industry."
Sure.
And I'm like, gosh, that's true. So lo and behold, I end up talking to some deer farmers who said initially, Doc, we've heard this all before. It just sounds too good to be true. I said, I know, I don't blame you, but the best way for me to do this is to prove to you that we can. So lo and behold, I meet a few guys, and ultimately they said, you got to talk to the executive director of the North American Deer Farming Association, a guy named Sean Schaefer. Sean he lives in North Dakota. He's been doing this for a while. He is a remarkable human. Sean is, you meet Sean, you're like, that dude's a cowboy. He's a cowboy. Well, he's a rancher. He's got his own deer farm. Sean wears cowboy boots and jeans and a cowboy hat and a sport coat when he goes to Washington and sits down and speaks to members of Congress. And he's extremely bright, knows what he's talking about. Got a similar response from him. And he said, what makes you guys different? Why do you guys think you're different than anybody else that's failed at this and any of the other technologies that are out there? And I said, well, this is kind of completely different than what anybody else is doing because we're not looking for prion, right? So you guys familiar with the prion portion of this? So you have a protein, which is a series of these amino acids that are all hooked together with different bonds, and it forms a shape, and it has to maintain that shape for it to work. So for proteins to all kind of bundle together, there's all these little polar bonds and like magnets, and they all have to fit together. As soon as that gets misshapen, when those bonds get broken and it misshapens, it doesn't have the same shape, all of that falls apart. So conducting a nerve impulse through it doesn't work anymore. And then they clump and they create little holes. And that's what the spongiform. Actually, if you ever get an opportunity or have ever seen a biopsy of a late-stage deer or human, like Creutzfeldt-Jakob, I had a patient with Creutzfeldt-Jakob when I was an intern very long time ago. It's a horrible disease. Their brain actually looks like a sponge because there's that many vacuoles or holes throughout the brain. It's incredible. And that's why, pretty soon you're not transmitting those signals from central station to all of the different organs, and they shut down. They just don't work anymore. And that's basically how the disease process works. Let me stop here because I'm kind of going on and on.
You've done a great job. There's a lot of information there that clearly supports that you guys are on to something really good here. Now, I guess my question is, you met with the deer farmers, and I mean, I'm sure you got a bunch of questions too, but you meet with the deer farmers. I'm assuming that was a great option for you to be able to get a lot of blood samples and a lot of deer and start building this database to be able to get all these genes all lined up, right? I mean, exactly, is that where it all started? I mean, so
exactly.
So now, and I'm assuming during that stage, you found deer with CWD.
So what happened is there are over 900,000 deer behind high fence in North America. That's a pile, right? And so there's a lot of deer farms that are positive for chronic wasting disease. And for those deer farmers, if you have one deer that's positive for chronic wasting disease, they'll come in and kill the whole herd, the whole herd. And then USDA says that you're responsible for proper disposal of all fencing, feeders, et cetera, anything that those deer came in contact with. And I can't remember if it's somewhere between 4 and 7 years, you can't use that ground for any agricultural purpose. So it's devastating for those folks. I thought it would be really easy to get samples of chronic wasting disease. It wasn't initially. Again, we're too good to be true. Who are you guys really? If I participate in this, am I exposing myself and telling the world that now I have chronic wasting disease when I didn't know I had it? So I'm going to lose my livelihood. So Sean invited me to come out to their annual conference, and I spoke at the conference and got a really extremely warm reception when people saw what it is that we're doing and what we're trying to accomplish. They're like, well, what is it that you want to do? What is it that you guys are going to do that nobody else is doing? And I said, well, number one, this is an antemortem test, so you don't have to kill the deer. Number two, you can draw as many samples as you want. as much blood is there. I mean, if you want to draw a deer and then 3 months later you want to draw them again, 6 months later you want to draw them again, you can do that.
Sure.
Whereas with a lot of the current technology, they do rectal biopsies. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that, but that, can you imagine? I mean, we just got 67 samples from Utah, from an elk farm in Utah. So if you can imagine they had to put those elk down, do rectal biopsies, and then they ultimately sacrificed those animals, then cut their brains out, and did confirmation studies. So, one of the vets said, "Hurry up, doc, we're running out of rectum here." So there's only so many tests that you can do, because what they're doing, the current testing, the kind of standard is something called IHC, immunohistochemistry. So it's a stain. So those misformed proteins will clump inside lymphoid tissue, okay? So in the rectum, you have lymphoid tissue. There's lymphoid tissue within the rectal vault, within the wall. And if you remove a section of that, maybe a piece about as big as this cap, and they stain it with a specific stain, you can look under the microscope at that tissue, and if there are prions there, they'll light up. They'll stand out. The problem is you can only do that about 4 or 5 times before you start running out of those follicles. So as a test, it makes it much more challenging to do that, obviously. If you wanted to do a study and say, okay, let's see if this animal has it. Yeah, it doesn't, but let's test them again in 3 months, and let's do it. So we ultimately said, here's what we want to do. We want to create a blood test that you guys can send to us, and in 2 or 3 days you'll get the results. And we want to have a greater than 90% accuracy, which is, I'll be honest with you, is pretty remarkable for any type of blood test. Without killing the animal. Without killing the animal. Which is, is huge. That's huge. We'll talk about wild population here in a minute, because I know we all have some passion about some of the things that happen with, the wild population and how, that's being managed. But the opportunity to do that blood test changes everything for those deer farmers. If the USDA buys in and gives us, an accreditation for the test. So we started talking to the USDA, and they're like, heard it all before, too good to be true, and, ended up speaking at the U.S. Animal Health Association conference down in Nashville, met some of the people face to face, showed them our results that we initially had, which, I can show, we may want to add so the folks can kind of see what I'm talking about, and how dynamic this bioprofile is for chronic wasting disease. Let's face it.
So this will show you if the animal has CWD currently, or if they're like predisposed to getting it later, or both.
If they have it currently. It's not predictive. Who knows? Maybe at some point in time down the line, it's a good question. Maybe some point in time. But right now, I would say no. This would be more of a diagnostic. Do you or do you not? What's important about this?
And that's purely based on gene expression.
On gene expression, yep. So what we found in doing human disease is that if you work backwards, so if you take samples from someone that has stage 4 cancer, okay, you do your initial discovery. So blacks and whites, very different. So a very dynamic bioprofile. Now you start testing people with stage 3. And lo and behold, some of those genes drop out. Stage 2, stage 1, and lo and behold, we look back and we can see very, very early stages, which is huge. It's absolutely huge because, example, the difference between stage 2 and stage 4 colon cancer, you're going to live, you're probably not going to live, right? So if I can discover that early, boy, oh boy, we've given you a true chance at survival here because now we've got an early intervention. And with cancer treatment, that really is, for the majority of cancers, early intervention is huge. It's huge. That's why, when I was practicing, I encouraged people to come in. They used to say, what's the one thing I can do, that would give me a chance to live longer? Okay, number one, quit smoking. Sorry for you smokers out there, but that's true. And number two, go get an annual physical. Guys are terrible. I know what he's going to do. Come on.
Thanks.
8 seconds.
I think that was today for me, but
that
was today.
So, but it can literally save your life. Yeah. So I'm off on a tangent here. I apologize. Let me leave it open for more questions. So
it's real good.
So then what we decided was, okay, we want to take this a step further. My business partner said to me, this is cool, but how is this, how can this help the hunting industry? What can it do?
Yeah, testing live deer is a lot more difficult when they're not in a pen.
Exactly. I'm going to catch that one. Yeah, good luck.
Yeah.
Right? So, and then the other thing is so this past fall, I shot a deer in Missouri, right? I shot a decent buck, pretty happy about that. You can't leave Missouri with that deer intact. And why in the world the guy that's working on this would say, nope, go ahead and, it doesn't need to be tested. I have no idea why I did that. So now I have all this beautiful, wonderful meat. Could that deer have had CWD? It's in a CWD area. Well, it'd be great if I had a way to test that. So what we decided to do is we're going to create a field test. It'll be a nice little box that you buy that you throw in your backpack, and you will shoot your deer. And you go up to your deer when you find it, and you pull out this Q-tip. And now we're all professionals at doing those types of tests with COVID, right? It'll be a test very similar to COVID, where you can dip in the blood, you'll dip in the solution, and in 15 to 20 minutes, you'll get a result as to whether or not that deer has CWD.
Without sending it anywhere, right there.
Without sending it anywhere, right there. So
if it's got CWD, just don't tag it. Just leave it there for the coyotes.
Well, it's a good question because other people have said that to me. Oh, they're just going to leave them lay in the woods. And I said, well, I'm hoping that maybe the DNR gets involved and they say, okay, you report that positive, you get another tag, right?
Yeah, dispose of it properly.
I think in Wisconsin it's that way right now, right? If you get it tested by the state and it comes back as positive, they give you another tag.
So
I don't know if Illinois does or not.
I don't know.
I don't know either. I don't know, but
we've been affected here in Illinois too. I mean, which is why when I heard you talk about this, I mean, and again, we're kind of, I guess I'm the king of jumping around here a little bit, but CWD is something that does affect all of us. I mean, when it comes to whether the quantity of deer that you're used to seeing, if the sharpshooting is going to happen, if you are a property owner and you're worried about your property values going down because there are less deer, and there's a lot of people that have spent a lot of money buying property for the recreational purpose. And some of the land that, that has been purchased in a lot of areas may not have even an ag effect, right? Like, I mean, you may not be able to have a crop and make income, So there are a lot of people who are buying property purely for the hunting recreational part of it. And you start getting to the point where there's a lot of sharpshooting and no deer, that definitely changes the value of that property for sure.
Right.
So these are big things, and I think where I'd like to go with this, as we get further into this, is how else these type of tests could be used. I mean, does it have to be killing of the deer? Can it be tranquilizing, like do an instant test and let that deer go, versus just the constant eradication and waiting for those tests to come back? But
so those are great questions, and I think ones that we need to address because it is important.
So
right?
So let me just ask a question here real quick.
You bet.
So right now, this field kit you're talking about, is this ready to go?
No.
Okay.
We're probably a year and a half out from that.
Okay.
Yeah.
But a lot of positive signs suggesting that we have this, or you have this.
This looks extremely promising for the blood test. As long as we can do the blood test, we'll be able to do the field kit.
Now, how quickly you got to do that blood test? I mean, is it like immediate, or how long? I mean, the blood
From the time we draw it, or till it's
you're talking
accessible.
Currently talking about the blood test for live animals.
For live
So
animals,
you got to get that one done.
Yep.
Passed, approved, USDA, all that stuff.
We probably
provided that happens, then you think the field kit would follow.
That's a very good question, and that was going to be our initial path. But we decided we're going to go parallel paths now. Why wait? We've
Sure.
already got good information. There's no reason why we can't start to work on that field kit, cut that time. Why wait? If it's going to take us a year to get through to a blood test where we've done enough samples where USDA is ready to test us, why wait until we have that approval when we can just do a parallel path and start working on that, because we have good
Makes sense.
results. We have good results already.
And I'm assuming that your testing to essentially prove, right, that it works, you're going to, I guess I don't understand. I don't understand the process by which they're going to confirm, because the traditional testing methods that we have, usually the animal has to be dead, right? So they're cutting the lymph nodes out of it and sampling that, at least in my experience. That's what they've typically done in Illinois.
That's all I know too.
Right. So
that is how it's going to happen.
So you're gonna have to test an animal that we don't know has CWD. I'm assuming. Do a test. Your test comes back, says, "Yep, this animal's got CWD." They're gonna go kill it, yank the lymph nodes out of it, do the traditional testing, and confirm that your test was accurate.
So here's how
Something
the
like
USDA we envision this happening. So they call them depopulations. Once a farm is marked for depopulation, whether that's 10 deer or 250 deer.
Right. So that's a farm where they found one positive
they
case.
found them,
and
and those deer are done. They're done. They're going to all be killed. What we say is, please draw all of those animals for us. Okay, draw all of those animals, and then once they've drawn those animals and they put those animals, they euthanize those animals. Then they go in and they, cut the brain spinal cord out, lymph nodes. They do all of the IHC testing, and they come up with a yes or no as to whether or not that animal had CWD. And it might be 2 out of the 250. It might be 100. Who knows? We don't know. But they will know their answer, right? So initially, we want them to tell us who's who, because we're testing ourselves, and we're trying to make. What you're trying to do is constantly improve the accuracy of your test with as few genes as you possibly can. Because ultimately, to do the test, when you're doing discovery, it's a very, very expensive process. So that's why for us at the front end of this, we're looking for investors, and we just heard a few weeks ago that the USDA has marked us to get a grant for almost $250,000. So they all of a sudden are like, wow, we think maybe you guys really can do this. And they actually sent us almost 60 positives within the past few months. So
And they're sending you blood samples.
blood samples, and then
we're
they'll send
talking
us
whitetail deer.
We're talking
specifically, right?
and whitetail deer. We've done mule deer also, so we're going to do whitetail, mule deer, and elk.
Right, sure. And my assumption there, from the USDA perspective, is, there would be considerable amount of interest in developing the same type of testing for livestock, right? Because I think that's one of the big concerns, is always what happens if CWD crosses the species barrier and gets into, pigs or cattle or whatever the case may be. So the assumption there is, I think a lot of people, I don't know, it seems like people talk like it's an inevitability, whether it is or not.
Yeah, I don't.
But people seem to talk that way.
Sure.
And if it does happen, obviously being able to test animals while they're still alive
is enormous. And
be
being
huge.
able to do that early
Sure.
is a huge deal. It really is. And again, that will be one of the advantages of doing gene expression as opposed to prion detection, right?
Right.
Is that we're looking at the physiology of the animal. How is that animal responding to the stress that's being imparted on it by that specific disease?
Right. So if they contract the disease, being a kind of a progressive type disease, right? They're going to have it for a while before they present any sort of symptoms.
Exactly.
So
And
you're
that's
gonna be
a
able
really
to
good point,
detect
because
that.
let's face it. A 4-year-old that's into hunting can look at a sick deer and go, that deer's really sick. Who
Sure.
cares about that's not what I meant. I didn't mean who cares about it. It's not important for testing. What's important for testing is to be able to make the diagnosis preclinical before that deer looks like
Looks
it's
completely sick.
If you could I mean, imagine, if you will, the DNR, and they are capable of doing this. You know, you go in and into an endemic area and you dart 30 deer and could test them on the spot and cull out the ones that are positive, let the other, 27 jump up and run away. It's a little different than killing all 30 of them.
Oh,
right?
100%.
You know, I mean, that's a different picture.
I'm down for that.
You know, and I mean, you know, if I can't tell you how the accuracy of the field test is going to be yet. We're going to hope that it's fantastic. If it's good enough, think about that. They don't even have to draw blood to bring it in. You can literally take a sample of blood right there. Oh, yes, positive. Boom. Next. You know. So yeah, there's great promise with this, and you're right, because one of the things that one of the heads of the USDA, specifically in regard to CWD, said, geez, Doc, if you guys can do this for CWD, can you do it for TB? Can you do it for brucellosis? I said, yeah. And the best part about it is if we do those, it's one blood draw. It's one blood draw, and we can tell you all three answers. There's a lot of process that has to go into getting those tests, done and approved, et cetera, et cetera. And like I said, it's really costly. And part of the problem for us with a lot of people that look at us, because most of the people that are doing research are in university type settings. We're a private business. This is what we do. This is it, right? This is our job. So we are driven to make this happen. However, if you work in a university, your salary is paid for, your benefits are paid for, the lights are paid for, your lab is paid for, right? So you don't have to have any of those expenses. We have all of those in addition to, we've got to buy the plates and the reagents and get the samples sent in and buy the tubes to send to the right place, because it's a specific tube that has to be used to draw that blood. And so it's a costly process. Once we move to the next step, we're already down to over 90% accuracy with just 4 genes. I mean, that's incredible. I mean, if we can hold
and those
that,
4 genes, for what you were talking about earlier, right? We're all born with whatever our genome is what we're born with.
That's
so
it.
what you guys are looking for is that like amplification or suppression of one of those genes based on the
absolutely
reaction
right.
to the prion. Okay.
Absolutely right. So remember that recipe. They got hundreds of thousands of recipes, and a good example that I use for folks is thyroid disease. So if you have hypothyroidism, low thyroid, you're not producing enough thyroid. People get pretty lethargic. It's your energy hormone. So lo and behold, there's a little sensor in your brain that goes ding, 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 ding. Hey, you guys, I'm calling down to the thyroid here, and we're a little low on thyroid. You guys want to fire up the machine there? So off a little signal goes to the nucleus inside that thyroid, and ding, 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 ding. It looks for the recipe. Are there miracles? Yeah, there are. So it finds that recipe and brings it back within the nucleus to something called the ribosome, which puts those nucleotides together to form amino acids to link together to make the protein that we call thyroid.
Sure.
And then there's a feedback loop that says, okay, we've got enough. Okay, guys, we've got enough. Shut the machine down. So that's happening, if you can imagine, with all of those thousands and thousands, that's constantly happening in our body. This technology is so specific that, if we wanted to try to come up with a bioprofile for throwing somebody in the snow, right, and creating a stress, some type of stress that we could is repeatable, you could find one.
Right.
That's how exact.
And we're going to do a blood test on you. It comes back and says you're never going to be a good buck killer. So you might as well just find something
You don't have
else
to.
do.
You don't have to test me. The results are in.
All right. So again, I'm rambling.
So live
Good
deer
information.
are wild deer, right? So obviously, I think there's probably a multitude of applications. First and foremost, I think for a lot of people, shoot a deer.
Can I eat it or
Before
should
I
not
eat it, I can test it and know if that deer is CWD positive or not.
You are on. It's very interesting. So, I'm in Buffalo County. We always get together with a group of, there's bow hunters and everybody's, it's a big, giant, fun group of people that I'll show here's George
Yeah.
and here's Bill and Turbo and Drop Tine Billy and all this stuff. So and I said that I often will say, so would you buy this test? 9 out of 10, absolutely, no question about it. And always there's the one person that says no, and then somebody in the group says, would you eat a deer if it was positive? If you knew it was positive? Hell no, he says.
That is a very interesting thing because it's crossed my mind a ton,
Sure.
right? We've been, we've had CWD here for well over 20 years. I mean, I think 2002 it was discovered, I want to say, here. So we're talking 23 years.
Yeah.
All across northern Illinois. We've shot plenty of deer here. And, a lot of the places, even if you get your deer tested, which is an optional thing, usually when you bring it in, we don't have in-person registration for archery hunting anymore unless you shoot one with a bow during firearm season.
Yeah.
So, but during firearm season, when you bring your deer in to get registered, it's mandatory registration in person, optional CWD testing. So they'll have a biologist there saying, hey, do you want to get your deer tested? Yes or no. Unfortunately, what people have learned through the years is I think in the beginning, everyone was like, hell yeah, I want to get my deer tested. I want to know. And then what would inevitably happen is when they take that test, they would say, hey, Todd, where are you hunting at? So I could put a pin,
I don't
pin
know.
on the map. Well, in the early days, people were like, yeah, I'm hunting. They just want 2 crossroads. Or give me the closest, major intersection.
Justin's home address.
And, as they would find positive animals, they'd mark them on a map, and then they would come in and do helicopter surveys and then sharpshooting. And then before you know it, all the deer in your area, because you were in a hot spot where CWD was detected, you get wiped out. So over the years, fewer and fewer people have opted into that
I understand
testing
that. Sure.
in spite of the fact that you might want to know because you might want to know if your deer is positive or not before you eat it, right? The other issue that's always come up is you take your deer to the local processor, right, to get processed. In a lot of cases, if you're getting like burger or brats or stuff, they're processing them in batches.
Right, you're not
right. They
getting
might be
your
doing
deer.
5,
May not just be
10,
your deer.
20 deer
Sure.
at a time. So
Yeah.
even if my deer's negative, who knows? So I mean, the reality is, there's a fairly substantial chance we've probably eaten CWD positive
probably
deer.
all
I
have.
think we probably all have.
Yeah, I would.
So the question becomes whether or not there's any sort of real concern of something that's never happened in human history that we are aware of.
Correct.
Yet,
Correct.
there's a lot of fear
Still,
of it. Right?
And the media's really helped with that.
Yeah.
Zombie deer disease.
Does the media really help with anything?
So I mean, it's a little
Really?
Crazy.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
you're right. When
zombie
you had
deer
that
disease
zombie
is an interesting.
Yeah.
one. It's just so funny that somehow that
got in.
came up, and the first person wrote it, and then they all just parroted what they've said for years and years and years. It's it'll
I
never
remember
go
looking
away.
at zombie deer disease in Yellowstone. I'm like, oh, jeez.
Yes, the zombie deer have made it out there.
But
What's interestingly enough, though, is I don't know, man. We've been hunting for a long time all over northern Illinois, in these CWD areas. And man, I can't tell you that I know that I've personally ever seen or know anybody who's ever seen a deer wandering around sick, dying of CWD. Not to say that it hasn't happened or can't happen.
I
But
do
it's
think I saw one.
But it's such.
But that's
But it could have been something else too,
Oh,
right? I mean,
100%. It could've just got hit by a
CWD
car.
isn't the only thing that deer die from.
100%.
Right, but it's the thing that's most in our minds because it's talked about the most, it's debated the most. It has all these repercussions with the sharpshooting program and the excessive amount of tags and all of these things. So
Bottom line, if somebody can get a field test, I'm going to have to agree that most hunters would want to be able to do an immediate test. And if you can, within 15 minutes, know whether or not your deer is negative or positive, is going to make a big difference. You're going to feel better about
Feeding your kids.
feeding your kids,
Sure.
cutting it up, whatever. I mean, that's my opinion. I'm all in for that, but I like the greater picture of this, where after a significant more amount of testing can be done, where if they find those hot zones and they feel like some eradication or reducing the herd in those areas need to happen, how amazing would it be if they could just dart them? I mean, what's the difference? I mean, the bottom line is you could dart a deer. I saw that only happen once in my career, and And I mean, they dart it. It goes down pretty quick. And for the most part, if you can go up there and do a couple tests and then decide within 15 minutes whether, like you said, this one's dying or this one's going.
Yeah, and they can keep those deer down for a long time. And when those deer get transported, there are deer that are down for hours and hours.
Yeah,
So
but
they
you're
have
talking about
control
we
over-
only
yeah.
need 15, 20, 30
right.
minutes.
And in those cases like you're talking about, so yeah, they can be ideal. It would be an ideal scenario. And then somebody else said to me, well, what good is this field kit going to do somebody, for the DNR? I said, well, what are there, there's like 14 million hunters, right, in North America? I said, if you get 1 million people to report from their kit, that gives you a pretty good idea of the percentage of deer that have chronic wasting disease.
People are just
across
so
the
leery
board.
of the reporting thing now.
They are. And 100%. And, even the deer farmers have said to me, we're so pumped on this test, and this would change our lives again because we can't, they have these deer that are worth a fortune and they can't sell them, right? Or elk, or, they can't
But
sell
depending
them
how
because
this
they
goes,
can't
you mentioned
cross the
Such a
border.
strange industry to me. I know that we want to try to protect or whatever, talk about it. It's just so strange. So strange. I just don't understand it.
But I would suppose with the reporting side of things, I mean, if you guys are a private company and this initial test comes out and there's a portion of this test that allows you, listen, you don't have to report. I mean, let's say you get this done, the test comes out, this gives you with a certain percent of accuracy, yay or nay. They don't have to report anything. That's just being able to give you the opportunity of knowing. You do have to report?
Yeah, so CWD is a mandatory reporting disease. Now, not during the
For
research.
the deer farmers, right? But not for
during-
the hunters.
us,
Even for us.
for the ones that are doing the test.
Oh,
So what about for the hunter
So-
who buys the field kit?
I'm
don't
doing
know.
the test, not you.
I don't know because
Because right now we don't have a way to test for
We're not going to necessarily
ourselves.
have to have USDA approval for that test, right?
I don't know.
Sure.
Yeah, no, I don't think.
I guess
you know,
not.
I don't think so. Of course, when we do this podcast, I may get some emails. What are you doing, buddy?
Well,
But I don't think that we have. For the blood test, in order for the USDA to allow Todd in Illinois to sell Justin in Oklahoma a deer, he has to be able to, and he had a positive farm, and he wants to sell this deer for 30 grand. The only way that's going to happen is if you have a blood test that's approved that says when I draw that test and that buck is negative, the USDA says, okay, that buck is negative. You can go ahead and cross state lines with it. So
Well, I think you could probably get a deal on a CWD positive deer. Pay half price.
Yeah.
Just throwing it out there. How do you think Todd got that one? He didn't pay full price for it.
You got to do what you got to do sometimes. Again, all interesting topics. I think that the general consensus is this. Anyone who's going to listen to this podcast, anyone who's interested in deer, I mean, we want the deer herd to thrive, and of course we don't want to see any disease disrupt the herd. And that goes for just about anything, right? Like, I don't want to see anything get wiped off the planet, really. I mean, whether it's a rhinoceros or whatever. I mean, I want to see all these things. Screw the mosquitoes. Those sons of the bitches can go. Get rid of the mosquitoes.
I think we all would agree there.
Yeah, I guess there's, okay. We're talking about animals now, not bugs. But anyhow, so, I mean, just specifically, I just think what you're doing is fascinating. I mean, my gosh, I'm sitting in here and I mean, my brain is just like learning a whole bunch of stuff. But I mean, I think the bottom line is if we can get to a point, and it sounds like you guys are getting closer, and I think this is the direction that it has to go. If we can get to a point where we can have an immediate test, feel good about the animal you just harvested, going home and feeding the kids. I mean, my gosh, how many times have we harvested deer and you cut those back straps out right then and there, and you're eating them that night,
Absolutely.
right? Like, I mean, if you could feel better about that entire process, great. If you could also then make sure that you're doing a better job if you're going to take the time to do that test and know that, hey, you know what, I'm going to just do and process this deer myself because you know what, I don't want to bring it to the to the meat market and have my ground and everything else get mixed up with everybody else's. I did my test. I'm just going to do all this myself. That's something we've talked about even in the past, doing more of that ourselves. I think that's all great information. And I think that's a test that, my gosh, I know I'm all in for it. I'd buy that in a heartbeat. Obviously, I'd like to see this thing get pursued significantly further, though, to the point, because you know what? I have been involved in areas where I've hunted where the deer density was significantly greater. And after some eradication and even just the hunt club alone that I own, where when I bought that thing 20-something years ago, I mean, I literally thought I would never have to go anywhere else to hunt ever again. I mean, period. I remember the day standing in there when they were building it, and I would see 30 deer, and it was amazing. And it has significantly changed as they started doing the amount of sharpshooting that has been done. And just because the sharpshooting is stopped, that doesn't mean during the sharpshooting time and after that hunters still aren't doing what they want to do. So at the end of the day, the bottom line is there's just a whole heck of a lot less deer. Yeah. So I mean, I definitely want to see the eradication stopped and be changed out with a method that I think could be more sustainable and better for the healthy deer that aren't sick.
My only comment on the eradication. So this was something I thought about when all your friends were calling you, right? Doc, what are we going to do? They want to give unlimited tags and open up the seasons and blah. Nobody's making anybody buy those tags and go shoot these deer all year long. That was always my complaint here in Illinois is the DNR's not forcing me to buy 6 tags and go fill all of them. I can literally just shoot 1 deer or no deer if I want. So hunters love to blame the DNR. We all do, right? But there's a certain contingency of people that are just going to buy every tag they can get and fill every tag they can get because they're allowed to do so. And
Sure.
I think if there was a way that you could somehow reach those people, I don't know that there is a way,
No.
right? But I mean, I think we've all probably had neighbors that way that are out there every season possible, filling every tag, bringing every friend, killing every deer that they can, get their sights on. And it would be like we, the hunters, are in the driver's seat. Like we kill the majority of the deer. No matter how much sharpshooting happens in Joe Davies County, hunters are killing, I don't know what the percentage, 50 times more deer than the DNR has ever killed. But the hunters are also all the ones bitching and moaning that there's no deer. So if we want more deer, we could also practice a little bit better self-control and restraint over how many deer we kill. So to your point, with all your buddies around the area, what are we going to do? Well, guess what? I tell you what we're not going to do is we're not going to get our rifles and go out there September through February and mow down every deer in sight. That's a starting point anyway.
I agree, Justin, but I do think early on, because I did own land in Wisconsin, and early on when this, and of course I was much younger and I wasn't paying attention to it as much as I am today, but I remember when it first came on, you're right. You had that opportunity to get all those additional tags. And there was portions of you who were like, yeah, give me 6 of those doe tags. And then you're like, you thought you were doing good because you were going to take those tags and maybe not harvest the deer, right? Like, I'm not going to shoot a doe anyhow, but I'm going to give them anyhow. But there also, I think, was a general kind of overlining kind of, I don't want to use the word threat, but thought process that if you didn't do some of that stuff, they were going to come in and take action themselves. And in Wisconsin, they did do some pretty heavy eradication for sure in some of the immediate zones. I can't think of it. Help me out here. It starts with
Iowa County you're talking about.
Okay.
Over in Mount Horeb area.
That's what I was thinking of. That significant eradication.
But I mean, how much of that was done by the DNR? I don't know, because that was a little prior.
Well, they made the decision to,
They made the decision, but they weren't pulling the trigger.
The quote-unquote eradication
zone. Sure.
Yeah.
But again, I think hindsight is always 20/20, right? I think as hunters now, everybody was like, well, that didn't work,
Right.
Yeah.
And here we are.
The percentage
all
of
those years
CWD
later.
in that county now is higher. Now that's
Gary, what do you?
Very high,
Yes.
right? And I think that's always been the argument that Illinois has made for our sharpshooting program has always been Wisconsin, specifically that Iowa County area, is doing nothing any longer, and their prevalence is skyrocketing, whereas Illinois has constantly, for the most part, maintained that 3 to 5% positivity. Now it's significantly starting to go up. I think you can only maintain that for so long before it starts to exponentially rise, and I think that's what we're seeing now, which is part of the reason that they've kind of given up sharpshooting in a lot of areas.
Yeah.
Because
that's what happened recently here is multiple counties from, I think, Lake, McHenry, Boone, just all the way across this northern border between Illinois and Iowa. Wisconsin, sorry. They just stopped doing the shooting, with the exception of the county that I'm in, where I hunt, where they're still doing some sharpshooting because the prevalent rate has not gotten above it. I think it was 6 or 7%. They said.
Yeah, I can't remember.
And then once it got above that, they decided to stop, doing the shooting. Either which way, CWD, I believe is real. It obviously is real. It's there. It is a terrible disease. It is going to take out some deer. Yes, we've had conversations about, no, I don't walk around the woods and I'm just seeing sick deer running all over the place, or zombie deer, however you want to put it. But it is real. It is there. I think there is a concern. I think obviously the blood test would be totally awesome. I know I would feel better about eating the meat for sure. But what are you thinking? I mean, with all reality, with your company, how quickly do you think a test like this could be on the market?
Well, here's the rate limiting steps. You got to have the samples, and then we have to have the money to do it. So hopefully this grant will come through from USDA, and we'll get some other investors. So anybody that's interested in investing, go to our website, please.
Sure. What is the website?
So it's just dreamgx.com.
Dreamgx.com.
We can put
now when you say, obviously the investor part's straightforward. You're looking for money to be able to help with that process. I get it. What about samples? I mean, can people participate in getting you samples if you're having difficult time getting samples?
So here's what I will tell you is that if you are a deer farmer that is marked for depopulation and going to be done by the USDA, we're far enough down the line now, we need those to be verified by the USDA, those samples, as to whether or not those samples are positive by their standard, because they're ultimately going to be the ones that blind test us, right? Mm-hmm. They're going to be the ones that send us the 20 samples and, you
tell us what you
deer.
find.
Yeah, okay, so this deer, we're not going to tell you guys this deer's got coccidiomycosis and this deer's got, something else, and, these 5 actually have CWD. Can you find that in the mixture? So by their standard, we have to make sure that we're using those appropriate genes, to make that the best diagnosis.
Well, I have to imagine those deer farmers that have been marked basically for shutting down their business, for the most part, would want to participate because they're
for the most part they have, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So again, now that the USDA is on board, it's a very interesting process, and I'm not going to pretend like I completely understand it. But what happens is you are marked for depopulation, but we don't know exactly when that's going to be. It all of a sudden happens once the proverbial trigger gets pulled. It happens within a couple of weeks. So you're like, oh my gosh, okay, now I've got to try to get my tubes to that spot, make sure I get in touch with whoever is going to do this depopulation to see if they're willing to draw blood before they put the animal down, right?
So what's the difference between before and after it's dead in terms of the testing itself? Does the genome begin to change?
It does. So we use something called messenger RNA, mRNA, and that stuff degrades pretty rapidly. That's why you have to get it in this tube, which has a substance in it that we'll call RNA later, right? It preserves that RNA. So that's why it has to get in that tube quickly, and that's why it wouldn't work for. And I'm saying that is what we're guessing, and what we want to do a little study here and have them draw an animal, euthanize the animal. Let's draw that blood in 15 minutes. Let's draw the blood in an hour. Let's draw the blood in 3 hours and 6 hours, and see if there's still how long do we have after that animal
Which
died
would
to
be
use
smart
the blood
testing.
test.
I mean, that would be.
Yeah.
I mean, the animal's going to be euthanized either which way.
Exactly.
I mean, if it's been marked to be done, it's done. So why not do that?
So at the front end, though, you want to. Science is very, very. It's very challenging. So you have to try to remove as many variables as you can. So that's why I say you want deer that are that you can verify are positive, and ideally, if you're going to look for an accreditation from somebody, and it happens in this case to be the USDA, then it may as well meet their standard right off the bat. So the other thing I will tell you about our test is, at one point in time, there were other researchers that were worried that we were going to destroy their research. And what I'll tell you is what we do can only enhance most of what they do. So if somebody's looking for a vaccine for chronic wasting disease, right? Well, wouldn't it be an advantage to be able to find animals that are extremely early stage, know who's stage 1, 2, 3, 4? Because eventually we'll be able to do that. We'll be able to see how early can we actually find this. We're doing a really cool longitudinal study with USDA where they have a BSL-4 lab. That's a biosafety lab level 4. So those guys literally, the scientists shower in and shower out every day. It's a building that these deer never see the light of day, right? So you have 20 deer and they're in these pens, and they're inoculated with chronic wasting disease. So we get blood before to make sure that they're negative, right? And then we get blood at 3 months, 6 months, a year. So and then you can follow and see when does that deer actually become positive. So that's how you'd be able to see earlier and earlier stages. So that has a lot of hope. But you have to, again, I keep saying it, I sound like a little bit of a broken record, but the discovery process is very, very expensive. We hope that, when we get to the field test, that it's, very affordable for hunters and in a reasonable area for the blood test for deer farmers or DNR or whoever would want to be able to do that. Anybody could, draw blood from a deer and send it as long as the deer was live when it was checked with the actual.
So why would there be a difference between a live deer having to draw blood into this vial and send it off versus a dead field test?
So we're looking at two different things. You're looking at more of a protein process, further down the line with the field kit. So that your gene expression kind of points you in the direction to find that. So that's why you have to do that. But it's a very different test.
Okay.
So yeah, it's amazing. My two business partners really are brilliant, and they are. Always be careful when you say stuff like this because then people turn the volume down and go, "Oh, brother, they're the best in the world at it." They are. They are.
Do you think there's going to be an accuracy difference between the two tests? Will it be more accurate to test a live animal than
probably
a dead one?
Probably more accurate because if you're looking at literally thousands and thousands of genes and you're able to come up with that one set. Now having said that, there's also the possibility that they could be of equal accuracy, right?
Sure.
So, but what you want is you want a test that's very accurate, right?
Yes.
And in medicine, if you have a test that if you're getting 90% accuracy, I mean, that's almost unheard of in medicine, so.
Interesting. Young Ben sitting over there just thinking about the day of just grabbing your bow and just going out bow hunting. What are you thinking about all this stuff? No mic. Oh, my goodness. All right, no mic for young Ben.
Ben doesn't have a camera or anything.
I know, but I like Ben. Ben's always a neat, young, enthusiastic person to add some additional stuff to this. So
Ben doesn't even know what CWD is, bro. He's going to learn, though.
Well, we learned it was chronic weirdo disease, which I'm sitting next to you, so.
I've had it my whole life.
He's had it as long as I've known him.
Also incurable.
Do you mind if I draw a little blood
He
before
brought
I
some,
leave?
yeah.
So.
Let's go.
Let's get it done. Well,
Just don't take a rectal tissue sample. We'll be good.
that sounds.
Yeah, that's what the vet said to me. I'm so excited about you guys having this test so we don't have to do rectal samples. I said, you should hear what the elk have to say. So.
All right. Well,
Can't sit down for a week.
no, that sounds terrible. Well, we want to definitely, give a shout out to the website again. You said you're definitely looking for investors, anyone who's looking to be able to participate, want to help out,
Would love to
get
have
a hold of
people
you.
do
I'm
that.
assuming the website has that information on
It has
there.
that information on it. You can, get in touch with us. Email. I think I even have my phone number listed on the website. Always
one way to
beware
keep
when you
it.
do that.
So, yeah, right.
Whoa.
So the website's what, DreamGX? Is that what it is?
DreamGX.com, yeah.
Is that business tied into the human
That's a
testing
very
business?
very good question. So it's a subsidiary of the original corporation.
Okay.
So Here's a couple of those.
Cool.
Share with all your friends.
Yeah.
So
we'll
yeah,
put
it's
this
a
up.
subsidiary of the corporation because the FDA would not like necessarily to have human and animal disease, mixtures going on in
Sure.
the same lab.
Makes
So,
sense.
and to be perfectly honest with you, one of the hopes that I have with this is, for people that are interested in investing, the potential market for that field kit is pretty darn good if you stop and think about the number of tests. We're not we don't want to just stop with CWD. We want to continue to do more testing, and we've already gotten some interest from some folks in the cattle industry, which, as you well know, dwarfs the number of
100%.
of cervids in North America. And actually, there's even in Finland and Norway, chronic wasting disease in reindeer. They wiped out a whole herd there, much to their own dismay. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent. A lot
Thank
of
you
information.
guys for having
Thank
me
you
here.
for
I
coming out.
appreciate
This
it.
is awesome.
Yeah, that's a lot of.
It's a lot of information.
DreamGX.com.
You do
can
not
learn
have to
more.
worry about me and Justin starting any businesses competing with this. I can guarantee you that right now. That is not going to happen.
Just me and young Ben.
That's fine. If you want to take Ben and start a
Ben's
business,
been taking notes over there like crazy. I'm a little concerned.
I'd rather. Yeah. You got all the notes.
Got to get
over
to
there?
work at mapping out the whitetail genome, Ben. That's your afternoon project.
Yeah.
Oh,
Why we're doing that? I guess if we're going to do that at the same time,
I
you can
just had
figure out which ones are
ChatGPT.
going to be the monsters, so we can make sure that those
That's right.
there get. Probably figure that out too. Which one of these young bucks are actually going to become the monster buck?
There is a question that you asked that I didn't finish the answer to. You said, how long will it take?
Yeah.
And I said, there's the rate limiting steps. It's the amount of money and getting access to the samples. I think within a year we could actually have even potentially both of them if we had enough funds and enough samples. So within 2 years for sure.
Excellent. Well, that's
So,
great. Well,
all
Gary,
right.
I definitely appreciate it. So before we close out here, just so I can give Bruce a jab,
Yeah.
who is the better hunter? Did we ever?
Well, there's no question about it.
That's you, right?
Taught him everything he knows.
Fair enough. Let's end right there. Poor
course,
Bruce.
he does have-
They don't
he-
call him Big Buck Bruce
He
for
does
nothing. I don't
he
even
does
know
have
the
a
guy,
pretty
but he's
generous
got a
wall
name.
of
You met him,
amazing
but
deer.
You met Big Buck Bruce. He came
did?
to our office like 15 years ago.
He's a. I'll tell you what.
I
Bruce
can't remember
is,
what I did
is a
15 minutes ago.
amazingly good hunter and a hell of a shot on critters. He kind of has that.
Can we analyze his genome? Find out why.
All right. Well, Gary, thanks again for coming out. That's a lot of information, and it'll be neat to kind of follow up with you. And, of course, at any given time that you get further along with this, we'd love to be the first ones to learn more and let us
Appreciate
know.
it. Would love to come back. You guys are
You're
awesome.
driving past us all the time, so we appreciate that.
You bet. Thank
Can't
you
wait
guys.
to read the comments. People are like, CWD's a scam. This is bullshit. Like, whatever. The government's.
Well, now the big one too is EHD is a bigger problem than CWD. It's like the part
that's
that
a
sucks.
popular one.
Yeah, that's real hot.
That's
right
some
now.
nasty stuff.
I
there.
mean, it does wipe them out in the short term pretty damn quick.
wow.
So it's a lot more visible. So it makes
And fast.
sense. Yeah. So it makes sense that people are like, yo,
Yeah.
we need to do something.
Yeah.
And it does seem to be getting more prevalent. Like, I don't remember EHD when I was a kid. I
Yeah,
never
you're kidding.
heard about it.
It's
It
kinda
wasn't even
gradually
a thing.
working its way north.
Now it's just like
Yeah.
every year. Like right now, Ohio's just getting slammed.
Oh, Iowa just got.
Did Iowa get? Well, I know they
I
got
thought
it
that was
last
last
year.
year.
Did they get it
was
this
last
year?
year. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, one of the guys that I'm working with from USDA is obviously they live in Ames. That's where that lab is, and his family's had property there. And he said, "Doc, we got wiped out. I mean, it's going
yeah.
to take years to
recover.
recover."
Yeah.
So
Terrible.
tough
All right
stuff.
then.
Well-
Gary, thanks again.
Thank you both.
We want
Appreciate
the deer
it.
to live so that we can kill them.